Welcome to our cross-border conversation. Today, we're sharing knowledge and insights about international production management and international production, discussing topics such as filming well in other countries, working well cross-border, including remotely, creating local versions of global formats, drawing on different cultural perspectives. Thank you to our partner Genelec, who support our talks, and Brunel University London, who support our mentoring scheme. I'm delighted to welcome our speakers here today.
Hello, everyone. I'm very thrilled to be here. I'm Andrea Jajeh. I am born and raised in Germany. I am an executive producer for Noisy Pictures, formerly known as Sony Pictures. We actually just transitioned from Sony to Noisy last month. I have always had a great passion for storytelling and moved to Los Angeles when I was 18 to study theater and film. And I always try to bring an international touch to my productions. Within the last almost 20 years, I have probably filmed in 20 countries and all continents of the world. For the past 10 years, I've been lucky enough to adapt an international television show known as Shark Tank or Dragon's Den all over the world. And I'm working alongside production management to, making the show run smoothly. But enough about me. I'm very happy to meet also my fellow speakers. Molly, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Molly McGregor. I'm a freelance production manager based in London in the UK, and I also produce as well. I'd say production management is my sort of day job and my bread and butter. I work primarily in the UK, but I have worked on some co-productions, and I used to produce promos and commercials, and some of them had a more international element. And I'm very excited to be here.
I am Karyan Au-Yeung, so I'm currently the development coordinator and researcher at Dare Pictures based in London in the UK. I transitioned from production assistant, development production assistant to now development coordinator and researcher. So I have a bit of a hybrid role. Yeah, I'm very happy to be here.
Today, we want to talk about and establish how international can mean a lot of different things. It can mean international formats, international productions, or international co-productions. But let's start at the beginning.
I think I was really drawn to it. I started out and I was working in development as well as production. I started working at the BFI, the British Film Institute, and sort of had an overview, and I just felt like I kept being drawn to production. I think the pace of it is so exciting. And it's that kind of thing, if anyone has the sort of brain where they like working on multiple things at once and having to juggle, I think it is something that you'd be drawn to. It's just you're always doing a load of different things at once. And I think, if you go into the production office, you don't actually know what's going to happen that day. Something completely ridiculous could come up as a problem, and it's your job to solve it. And I think that's what anyone I've kind of worked in production is drawn to. They like that sort of last minute panic almost, and having to fix problems that you would never even imagine were going to be a problem until they happen. So in that sense, I think I was just drawn to the excitement really, and not knowing for definite what was going to come next. And I think that's the case whether you are freelance or in-house. I don't think it makes a difference. There's always that sort of element of surprise that I think is very, very appealing.
You did also bring us a clip of your most recent, is it your most recent work? Or I think, do you want to talk a little bit about it?
Yeah, it's not my most recent work. I've worked on a few things since then, but it's the most recent one that I think has come out of post-production, because as we know, it takes ages, doesn't it? So I think it's the most recent release. And this was a film called Matriarch that released on the Hulu platform, and I think Disney Plus in other areas. I know it is in the UK anyway. And this was us working as a UK-based production company shooting in the UK, but with US execs. So we were one out of, I think, 7 films in this sort of programming feature, and we were the only ones shooting in the UK.
Laura?
Mom?
Are you okay?
I had an overdose.
Laura. Come home. I could look after you.
Everything here is just like old times. You're the first person I've seen who actually looks like they've got any older since I left. Doesn't anyone die around here?
I knew I recognized you. Your mother. She's very popular in the village.
Mum?
Oh, I've missed that word. Say it again.
This isn't how I remember it. Things change. You haven't.
I never hurt you.
Remember when you threatened to take my mouth shut? I want to try to get past the past.
Of course.
Your mum asked me to make sure you didn't leave.
Do something against God. Something changed your mother and changed the village.
What's happening to me?
I just wanted you to be perfect.
What was your role in it?
So I was the production manager on that project. I knew the company really well that were producing it because I was in-house there before I switched and production managed this project for them. So it was a UK production company, but our execs who commissioned the project were US and they came over as well. And I think we filmed end of last year, so COVID was extremely rife, and that was one of the things I think was the difference between the US and the UK approach, and sort of consolidating that and working with Disney Protocols, as they were the ones who owned the US company 20th Century Digital. So it was definitely an interesting one to work with, sort of US protocols and marrying them with UK ones. It was quite interesting.
Like, how are they different? Like, can you?
It just they're some just really basic things, like some of their paperwork is a little bit different, and then with the COVID protocols, the sort of state of COVID at the time in the US was quite different to the UK, and how different regions were approaching it, and that was a sort of challenge, was working on that. And I think generally in the US their working hours and things like that tend to be a little bit longer, whereas ours are very slightly, I mean, we still have really long hours, but they're still, you know, a little bit shorter. And I think that was some of the expectations I think that we had to manage, of this might be a little bit different to the other features in the program they put on, the sort of Halloween program. You know, our shoot, when budgeting, might take a few days longer because we don't work, you know, over that 11-12 hour period, that kind of thing.
Karyan, you also brought a trailer that shows us a little bit about what you've done or a project you've worked on. Do you want to introduce it yourself?
Yeah, so the trailer is for a short film called Canada's Keepers, and it was basically about the missing and murdered Indigenous women in Canada, North America, telling sort of the historic injustices against that group of people. I jumped on that project as a sound recordist, and I think we shot it in 2020, January, just before the COVID situation happened. But it was in Vancouver, so it was like minus however many degrees. The snow was like up to our knees. Yeah, so Nikki, could you please play the trailer?
Life was good. Didn't have a worry in the world. Everybody was happy. Until residential school got in the way of everything. Life wasn't so good there.
I think Canada has always had a very strategic and very straightforward method of assimilating and getting rid of Indian people.
We have so many Indigenous women who have gone missing. We don't know where they are.
We know history has always been written according to the alleged victor. There's no victor in Canada unless you call a thief victorious.
Can you tell us a little bit more about how you, like, your work might be different, like shooting in Canada than in UK?
So for this particular project, delving into such a sensitive and like personal topic on Indigenous women in North America is something to be like fully aware of and like consistently aware of throughout the whole project. Because I think, especially when you're crossing international borders and it involves you having to tell or facilitate for an environment that is honest and comfortable for the subject or these people to tell their story and share their experiences on screen, it's incredibly important for you to be socially aware, intuitive, and also adaptable to the people that you're working with and their needs. And of course, like even more so when the subject is so deeply personal. I think also you can't predict what's going to happen on the day. Like Molly was saying, in production, when someone's discussing such personal stories or such personal experiences, you never know on the day how they're going to feel, whether they're willing or more forthcoming or less forthcoming to show their story. You have to be really aware of that. And I think for all of us on the team, that was just our number one priority, to make sure we're facilitating for a comfortable and safe environment for them to tell their stories honestly.
Get that, yeah. Well, makes me want to go out there and film somewhere else again. For the past 10 years, I've been pretty much stuck in Germany, filming here, mostly locally. Like I said before, I adapted the international show Shark Tank or Dragon's Den. I don't know if everybody knows it. Real quick, there's a founder, there are 5 investors, and the founder comes in, pitches his idea or his business, and he pitches for money, and the investors either invest or they don't. They invest their own money. The show has been produced in over 40 countries, so Germany is just one small territory of it. Obviously, when you adapt a show like this, the pressure's on. So we did feel very high pressure when we started 10 years ago. In Germany, actually, nobody believed in the show. It took us 5 years to sell it, even though it was already a success in the US and in the UK. Because in Germany, and there we come back to the cultural differences, we don't talk about money. It's pretty much frowned upon to like show off and show what you have. And so nobody believed in it. Business television has never, ever worked in Germany before. So it took us 5 years, and at some point Vox took a risk. And then we adapted it. And the first thing we looked at was the title. And we noticed that we don't have dragons here. Like, again, coming to the culture. If we produced a show and called it Dragon's Den, everybody would have thought it's like a fantasy movie coming up. We don't have sharks either. Sharks to us are very distant, very, very dangerous animals that you definitely do not want to get in contact with. So nobody would walk or swim in a shark's tank. So we chose lion's den because we do have a saying, like, are you strong enough? Are you like brave enough to walk into the lion's den? So that pretty much worked very well for us. So we started there and adapted the title. But I think the most important thing when you adapt an international hit show like this is like you do not have to reinvent it, because obviously it's successful, obviously it works, but you do have to be very aware of your audience and know your audience and look at like the little things. For example, when you do produce an international show, you usually have a format this big. You have an international or flying producer who flies around all the territories, and he like looks at how you produce the show or how you want to produce the show, and he makes sure like you follow the format's rules. And so he came to Germany as well when we started out, and he said, okay, you have to put like stacks of money on the table. I don't know, we saw it in the trailer, like some territories actually do it. The investors have like stacks, piles and piles of money on the table to portray that they are rich and they can invest their money. And I said, there's like definitely no, that we can't do that. Like it's just gonna flop, like people are gonna hate it. And actually the network said they won't do it. They won't produce it this way. So I had like about a 3-hour discussion with the flying producer about the money on the table. And at some point I had to say, look, either we're gonna do it without the money or we're not gonna do it at all. And we ended up, thankfully, I convinced him at some point, and we ended up doing it with no money on the table. And it worked for us, but we did take a lot of things from the original or from the different territories. We actually did spend a lot of time studying all the territories, and I would recommend this to everybody who adapts an international show, because you can learn from what worked and you can learn from what didn't work. I actually went to Los Angeles when we started out, and I spent 2 weeks on the set of Shark Tank, and I followed the executive producers around, and I became a student again. I really just asked a million questions. I looked at how the cameras were set up and how the lighting was set up, and I just asked them a gazillion questions, and you know, learned and listened. And learn from, and there were a lot of things that he's, you know, the EP said, look, we tried this, it didn't work. We tried this, it didn't work. And I just like followed into, or I took his advice, and it saved us, in the end, it saved us a lot of money. It saved us a lot of time because we just knew how to do it. So that's really, really a very strong suggestion to just try to get in contact with different territories. And spend as much time as possible on foreign sets to just study them. It doesn't have to, you don't have to like take everything home and like copy everything, but just to study it and get a view of how other people do it.
Andrea, just to clarify, was Lion's Den filmed in Germany?
Yes, we do film Lion's Den in Germany. Like every territory films its own version in its own country, and we do film with a German crew. We do try to film internationally, like international packages with the founders or with our investors. We have actually shot in Florida, in New York, in Malaysia, in Hong Kong, in China. Just also maybe to show how like things are produced and just to dive deeper into the startup's history.
So did the judges change based on the country, that kind of thing?
Yes, every country has their own judges, yes.
Did you find, obviously you've mentioned it's been in Germany about a decade now, do you find that with the show being present, obviously becoming a success and sort of defying doubts that people had about German audiences, do you think that has the format changed at all, or has the audience's attitude, do you think, towards, I guess, this kind of business format changed? Have you found anything like that happening?
Well, actually, I think 5 different networks went on air with the business show after us. And they tried to, yeah, it was amazing. They tried to copy the Lion's Den in many, many ways. It's very, very difficult, though, to do a business show as an entertainment show, because when we cut to the truth, it's talking heads talking about money and numbers. So it didn't work so well for the other formats and networks. But yeah, we have not changed a lot of things. Obviously, like, you know, we lost one of the investors at some point, season 4, and we introduced new investors. We have guest investors coming in.
You said that no one wanted to, like, no one believed in the show for so many years. What made you continue to push for it to happen, basically? And what was the sort of maybe like turning point where people were like, okay, we believe in this now, let's go?
Well, we pushed, I think, because we just saw how successful it is in the UK, in Canada, in the US. And it's like with all cultural differences in all different countries internationally, that's really something we all have in common. We all like have dreams and dream big and want to succeed in what we do. And that's why we kept believing in the show. And actually the head of the network changed and he took a risk. So that was, yeah, he actually, I think he came from Spain, and he knew the show and he believed in it, and he took a risk. And afterwards, funny enough, every network tried to get it. But yeah, we do usually shoot in Germany. We do shoot international packages. We sometimes work with international crew. Sometimes usually it works very, very well. I shot a package with one of our investors in New York, for example. We had a local team coming from New York, and I was very, very happy about it. And it's usually very helpful to have at least one crew member coming from that local territory. For example, we like lost the location we wanted to shoot at, and we were looking for a new location where, I don't know, we just came up, okay, let's shoot somewhere where we can see the Brooklyn Bridge. Okay, where do you go? Like, when you're not from New York, where's the best spot to like find it or to see it? So obviously the camera guy knew exactly where to go, and it saved us probably 3 hours of research and try to get there. So I would always suggest having, we at least try to book a local scout that like goes with us, and also like dealing with people abroad. It's just easier if you have somebody on the crew. Also, we're very open right now to, especially you mentioned COVID. With the development of COVID, people working from everywhere, people working remote. I have one of my co-producers actually moved to Portugal last year, and she completely works from Portugal, comes in for the shooting days, but it works well. Like, my experience is that you can just really make it work. I think, Molly, you also have quite some experience with remote working, right?
Yeah, I've done a few bits of remote working, especially when I was doing more sort of promo commercial stuff. Either I would be producing the clip or part of a clip remotely, especially if it was something like occasionally there's a music promo where maybe the artist was from a different country, and it was mostly shot in the UK, but we'd also do elements in their country. And I think it worked really well to have a fixer in that country and a local crew. You know, sometimes you take the DOP and the director over, because creatively they're so important and to sort of keep the style consistent. But in terms of other crew and other production crew, it works best, as you said, I think, when you have local talent working on it, because they know the area really well. If there is a very last minute problem, they are far more sort of qualified than us to know exactly how to fix it in that area. So yeah, doing that sort of hybrid of having a couple key creatives go over but using local crew, I think works really, really well. And I think it works well also if you have some local creative talent too, which I haven't worked that way as much, but I think is definitely helpful, particularly if you're working with a sort of cultural theme or more sensitive theme. That's a necessity. I think you need to have someone who's immersed in that culture, or who knows the people that you're speaking to, whether that's documentary or, you know, a fictional adaptation or whatever. I think that's really important too.
I think this is a good time to ask a question just popped into the Q&A. I think for Molly and Andrea, that'd be really useful for you to expand on it. So someone has asked, what are your thoughts about working with local talent when filming in other countries rather than flying crew and other talent out? So for example, you're talking about all these benefits of having local crew on set, that kind of thing. What are the benefits to flying crew out, or having a mixture, and how do you, I guess, maintain continuity between your vision as like for example, Molly, if you're UK crew and you're all versed in what's happening, and then you go to this new country, how do you make sure the people that you're working with that you've never met before will be on the same sort of page?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned it, what I've tended to do in the past is that whoever has developed the project creatively goes over to maintain that consistency. So usually that is the director, quite often it's the DOP, and sometimes it's other talent as well, like an art director or production designer. It depends, to be honest, I think, how much time you have in that pre-production. If you have a lot of time, I think in the current climate, you can absolutely have, you know, production designers and even DRPs and other talent that are remotely based, as long as you have that time to remotely prep with them. But in terms of crew, like, you know, gaffers and PAs and departmental below the line crew, absolutely, it's the most helpful to have someone local who has the industry contacts locally, who, as I mentioned, if there's a problem, they're much quicker to fix it. And I think having a fixer, so that's when you have, you know, essentially a overseas production manager wherever you're shooting who helps you prep the project, they're always completely invaluable, because it's the kind of situations like Andrea was saying where, you know, a location falls through or something, they're gonna absolutely have so much more knowledge than you have. And you know, sometimes, to be honest, you get the fees through or whatever and you think, oh God, it's so expensive. But then there will always be something that comes up where they will absolutely be worth their weight in gold, because they do come in with any problems and they just swoop in and fix it. And there are obviously some parts of the world where you just would not be able to do that yourself. You need people who have local on the ground knowledge, I think, no matter what sort of style you're shooting.
Should we take another question from, when you talk about remote working, is this something that is easy to organize and negotiate with employers, or do you find you come across resistance? How do you handle this process?
My experience, it's depended on the role, and I think it has definitely changed over time, and I think COVID's accelerated it as well. So I think people are more and more open now to remote working than even they were 2 years ago. I think there's already a big difference. When I'm production managing, I've never been allowed to do that remotely, because my employer has always wanted a proximity to set. But then the other roles, or when it's in pre-production, I have worked remotely. So before we are actually filming, there are some jobs where I've done them totally remotely, and it's worked out really well, especially if you're doing stuff like Zooming every day and things like that. You know, there's, for a few roles, I think there's no need to be in person anymore, and I think it still works really well. Obviously, you know, a gaffer can never, well, that's probably a bad example actually. A gaffer usually would not be able to work remotely. There's a few roles where I think if you're on a large scale production, they probably won't ever be totally remote. But I have heard about, you know, people working in volumes and things like that, where someone like a gaffer, a DRP, does remotely sort of tune in and direct other crew members. But I don't have that much experience with that. So I think it's quite role dependent and depending on the production.
I feel it really depends on it's easier to work remote with people that you've worked with before. I sometimes tell people that, you know, a lot of people want to work from remote right now, but I cannot have a team of 50 people spread over the world and try to like get through time differences and everything. But, you know, once you've put in the work and you've gained the trust, and for example, my co-producer, I've been working with her for 10 years. I know exactly how she works. She knows exactly how I work, and it just works. I trust her enough to be at the end of the world and do the same work and be available when I need her, and the other way around. So I think if you have a good relationship with the people you work with, that's the most important. It's probably difficult to start out remote.
Just to add to that, my role is completely remote and started off remote, and I met the majority of the team now, but there's still a couple of people that I've never met before in person. So in terms of just adding to handling the process, I think, like you said, especially if we're collaborating internationally, like most of us are, I was working on a production coordinator role, but with a Canadian team, but with different, I think maybe like 6 or 7 different teams all across the world, including India, in Europe, all across Europe, that kind of thing. Like you said, I think it's really important to remember time zones. That's just like the basic thing. And communication is a huge one, but also learning what the other person's communication like style is. So someone may feel like it's it's in their nature to sort of send emails or like long emails or that kind of thing to communicate certain problems. Other people prefer Zoom calls, other people prefer phone calls. So I think if you set expectations and sort of ask those questions from the get-go and kind of understand what style or what kind of communication they would prefer or what they want from you, I think that can really help with remote working and managing expectations, basically, so you can sort of build a good relationship.
Molly, you produced remotely, right? And I think you brought another clip for us to watch.
Yes, yeah, there's a clip I have of production. It was a two-parter. So Axe body spray in the US is Lynx in the UK. So we produced two similar clips back to back, one with a US rapper, which is this clip, and one with a UK rapper, which I don't have the clip of. And when we filmed elements of the US rapper, I worked remotely and we had a local crew, and it ended up just being our DOP going over in the end.
You can tell, bro. You can tell when you're talking to a girl, she's not even looking at you. She's looking at your mouth.
All right. Boiler room, access. Lil Yachty's in the building.
You ain't Uzi, you ain't Cardi, damn, show not me, never on.
Back then, rap was way different, but I knew it would work because it was fresh.
Just like Sting, came up popping, then I dropped it because I'm not a fan.
I've definitely seen lookalikes all the time, you know? And of course, bees just got back cooler. When I was in high school, no dudes was wearing bees in the hair. That was a joke.
So that was shot in Atlanta, in the US. And I think it was 2 days in the end, plus a day recce the day before, following Lil Yachty, who's the rapper in the video, around and visiting places that are important to him, like his old school and things like that, and then a talking head interview essentially with him. It was actually originally the director and DOP who were meant to go over, and then the director ended up having an emergency and having to get off the plane while it was on the runway. So that was one of those, you know, putting out a fire moments that happen. And that meant that our DOP ended up working with someone locally. And I guess in the end, really, the local crew kind of ended up having more creative input than they were originally going to, and it worked out quite well in the end. The video is as we planned it to be, really, and yeah, that was some local crews, so local lighting and camera guys, and we had a production manager over there who helped source locations and things like that.
And how did time zone or currency exchange rate, did that influence your budget or your schedule?
Not hugely. We did have two different budgets for the UK and the US shoots, but they were both around the same amount, because the UK one we actually had to travel around quite a bit in the UK anyway, so it kind of worked out quite similar. And we only took two members of, well, ended up being one, but we paid for two members of crew to go over from the UK. So it wasn't like we had a whole expensive sort of cohort going over. And that was one of the reasons I worked remotely as well. Like, it didn't feel like I needed to be there in person. It felt adequate that I zoomed in, and just after every location scout, things like that, I would speak to the production manager over there. And I think that worked well. You know, I trusted their judgment on locations and things like that. It was quite easy in a sense that the talent in the video, you know, is places that are important to him. So it wasn't a case of, you know, you have to find a stately home and having to look at 10 different versions. You know, he knew what was important to him, and so he had quite a specific directive in that sense. But it was nice hearing the production manager over there who was really into rap and things like that. So he was giving us a lot of direction on other different areas, and I think they filmed a bit in some eateries and things like that he knew would be popular, whereas I just didn't have that knowledge of Atlanta and things like that. So yeah, it worked well. And the videos, the UK and the US videos, they match really well in terms of tempo and things like that. I don't think stylistically you would know that it was different crews.
Should we continue with the question that just popped up for you? For the two of you, Molly and Karyan have talked about having hybrid roles. Can you explain that and the benefits and how it works in practice?
Okay, so I would say my role with DARE has definitely changed and evolved in different ways, but I think I've learned that hybrid roles are really important. So I was initially, like I said, I was supporting on productions and development. And even though my role right now is more development centered, there is still opportunity to work across production based on priorities and depending on what's happening. I think it also should set an example to other companies, regardless of size and status, because when you consider uncontrollable, essentially life-changing things like COVID, having the more open-minded and like flexible attitude to how you operate and manage production company is really important. So it's widely known that there's a huge demand for production coordinators, production managers, the more logistical organizational roles that still do involve creative thinking and creative problem solving, but maybe thinking about it in a way, how can we use that to our advantage? So not by spreading people thin, but having strong and frequent communication between departments, encouraging collaboration, allowing and enabling for things like hybrid roles, because as the world has shown us, anything can happen at any point. So that creativity that you find in development, brainstorming and ideas can also be parallel with production management. So the creative solutions and ideas that I needed to make something happen. So I feel like for me, both departments aren't separate and they become so much stronger when you're coordinating ideas and working together, as opposed to seeing them as very like traditionally structured or separate. So I think when you have a bit of a more of an open-minded and flexible attitude, that's when you can really like thrive with creativity.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Sorry, I have worked in development in the past, and I think it's quite handy actually when I'm on a shoot, because I'm so interested in scripts and characters and things like that. I think a couple of times, like on a TV shoot I've just been on, when we're trying to find a solution to a very logistical problem, you know, you're throwing a load of ideas, and then you still have to take that step back, I think, and say, well, would the character do that? You know, when you're kind of throwing out a totally different solution, and it always does return to the script. So I think that's definitely so true. Hybrid for me, I guess, is I work as a production manager. I have my agent for production managing. That's a big focus for me right now, but I still am producing stuff, and I have a small slate of things in development right now. I'm finding it, to be honest, quite difficult to balance both, because when you're on a shoot, you know, you're working 12 hours a day. There's not a lot of room for everything else, but freelancing means that I can step off a project and have, you know, 1 to 3 months of working purely on development. So that's personally how I'm doing it at the minute, and it's working fairly well. But I think quite a lot of people in this industry do kind of have multiple roles, whether openly or not. I think it's fairly common for people to be working you know, in development and doing something else, or vice versa. And I think it's quite interesting. It does seem to happen a lot. You know, you can develop so much in one area, and I think there's, as you said, there's a lot of sort of cross-departmental knowledge, and you know, I think my time in production managing is still really useful when thinking about producing, because I have, you know, a really great budgeting brain, for example, and eventually the sort of development and the production parts do mar together when you're producing. So I think you can definitely work in a hybrid sense, and it not necessarily having to feel like you're doing totally separate things.
What other departments do you collaborate across for best metrics working?
Okay, I can take this one. So as I mentioned before, production and development, I don't view them as entirely separate. So for example, we'll have like a production manager talking to the director about what they want, what their vision is, but also like the nitty-gritty logistics, budget, that kind of thing. What do they want it to look like? What can we compromise on? What can't we compromise on? I think those conversations, even just casual brainstorms, are really important, because then you have a different perspective or a different role in that conversation. So I'd say that even if you think that it's not within their remit or within their working remit, asking those questions and getting opinions from other people, even with production management as well, having conversations with finance department, accounts department, that kind of thing. I think for me, just open communication across all departments is so important, just so everyone's in the loop and knows what's going on. And I think you create a healthier culture and environment.
Yeah, I think if you're working in any sort of production management capacity, you have to communicate with every single department, and quite often you're kind of the conduit between two different departments or all different departments, and you're kind of the vessel that carries the message, I guess, quite often. And I think I always think it's good to remember that you're not expected to have as much knowledge in that person's department as they do. Like I think post-production is quite a good example for me, in that there is still quite a lot of technical jargon that goes over my head in post-production, and I think you just have to say, like, I don't know what this word means, can you please explain? And it happens all the time on set as well. You know, a gaffer or a DOP will start talking to me about kit that they need, and you know, I vaguely heard what the kit is, or I know vaguely what that kit does, but it's just being able to ask them questions and being really honest, I think, about, of, you know, I don't have technical expertise in that area, can you explain it to me? And then going on and explaining that to other departments as well. And you know, you have to do that, I think, in order to approve certain things for budget, or to explain, for example, to a director why a certain vision they have might not actually work, and that kind of thing. So I think sometimes production management is kind of translating what other departments are saying to each other.
It sounds like we're all agreeing that communication is key on local productions, even more on international productions. Do you have any other hot tips for the end?
I think in terms of working internationally, it's trusting that your local crew in quite a lot of elements might know best, and being able to trust other people, I guess, who quite literally might be across the world with the project, and being able to do that, I think sometimes is a little bit difficult, especially if they're working in ways that are foreign to you, and you maybe don't have a in-depth sort of understanding of that process. So I think, yeah, their trust as well, I think, when working internationally. But at the same time, Andrea, like you were saying, sort of taking that leap of faith, you know, you knew that the format worked internationally. You obviously had this strong feeling that it would work in your country as well. And I think sort of being able to take that ownership is really impressive and really exciting.
Just rolling off what Molly said with translating between departments or translating between these people, because I think sometimes the reality of a production might be quite tough to talk about for certain people, or whether, like I said before, managing expectations. So all of that needs to be thought about, and yeah, like ending on the note with communication is really key, and it's fine to continue, like, repeatedly ask questions and just make sure that everyone is on the same page always, I think.
Absolutely fascinating conversation. It's just been such a joy to have the chance to listen to your cross-border conversation and hear your different insights and knowledge from two different countries on this occasion, Germany and the UK. So it leaves me to thank Andrea, Molly and Karyan for your excellent conversation. So thank you very much to Genelec once again for supporting the talks, and to Brunel University London as well for supporting our mentoring scheme. So thank you very much.
Thank you.